Hi everyone, welcome to Friday Focus. Thank you for joining us online today. For those of you that are not familiar with this format or perhaps haven't attended one of these talks before, Friday Focus is an online talk series that is hosted by the Hunterian, and we are the Museum and Art Gallery at the University of Glasgow. In each edition of these talks, we'll hear from a different speaker or speakers, and we'll discuss a different topic. We tend to look at our exhibitions and displays that are happening across our venues, as well as research that goes on at the Hunterian and across the University of Glasgow, and all the exciting work that happens behind the scenes with our collections. So today we're going to be talking about our latest contemporary art exhibition, which is a solo show by artist Margaret Salmon titled Assembly. What you're seeing on the screen here is the introduction panel to the show. I'm really pleased to introduce today's speakers as well. So we'll be in discussion with Helen Nisbet, who is the new director for Glasgow International. Helen has worked in various curatorial and leadership roles, including as artistic director at Art Night in London and curator at Cubic Gallery, also in London. She was a member of the Turner Prize jury in 2023 and sits on the board of the artist-led project Garda in her native Shetland. And Helen will be in discussion today with Margaret Salmon, who is a New York-born artist-filmmaker. Margaret has been living and working in Glasgow for some time now. She makes films, photographs, and objects that fuse a legacy of social realist representation with contemporary, critical, and poetic frameworks. Much of Margaret's work and what you'll see in this show and in the presentation today has been made close to home or even in her own home and her local neighbourhood. Margaret is interested in everyday life and the ways in which we live together and apart. And the show that we're talking about today, Assembly, can be described as a gathering of materials or an assemblage, bringing together film, photography, objects, and artist research into one space. Central to this exhibition is a new film that Margaret's working on, To a God Unknown, which will evolve throughout the exhibition run, and we'll speak to that a little bit later on. So before we get into the talk and I hand over to our speakers, I just want to say that we'll have a bit of a presentation today, and then there'll be some time at the end for any questions that you might have. You can pop your questions in the chat by clicking on the speech bubble, which should be at the bottom of your screen somewhere, and I'll read those out for you at the very end. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us online today, and I will hand over to Helen and Margaret.
Thank you. I will begin by saying hi, everybody. I hope you're having a good Friday so far. And also a little bit of an introduction to me and to Margaret. So I had the pleasure of working with Margaret Salmon a couple of years ago when I was director of the National Contemporary Art Festival Art Night. I showed the opera film History of the Present, which Margaret made with writer and academic Maria Fusco at the 2023 festival, which took place in Dundee. And we showed it at the gorgeous Dundee Rep. It's been really lovely to reconnect with Margaret so early into my return to Glasgow. I've only been back for a couple of weeks, so really thanks so much to Dominic and Eleni for the invite to do this talk and a chance to spend some time with Margaret and her work. So Margaret, your show at the Hunterian Assembly includes film, photographs, domestic objects. We're looking at images of it on the screen just now. Blankets, other artists' work, scraps of writing, various materials. The exhibition also shifts and evolves in 3 phases: spring, summer, autumn, through the duration. There's so much to talk about with this beautiful, moving, experimental, wide-ranging show. But I would like to begin by focusing on Cladach, one of the films shown in the gallery in the lead up to or as a preparation towards To a God Unknown, which is a film drama currently in progress. So in Cladach, you film, and I hope I'm pronouncing Cladach correctly, you film a community in Ullapool living next to the pebbled shoreline of a marine protected area. The sounds of feet tripping over pebbles on the beach, of the ferry, the girl playing the accordion, adorned by and surrounded in sumptuous red, These were particularly meaningful for me. They remind me of Shetland, where I'm from. And then towards the end of the film, you wade into the sea, and all of a sudden, we're existing with the indigenous habitats and species that live alongside the people and are so rarely witnessed or given attention. And these living things are also credited at the end of the film: barnacles, brittle star, cup coral, langoustine, sea cucumber, sea squirt. And I was particularly struck by and felt an affinity with the serpulid worm, a creature so cautious and sensitive to light and vibration that when disturbed, it will rapidly retract its tentacles. And the care and patience required to film such a creature isn't entirely different to the care and emotional intelligence needed to work with and within communities. So in the sketchy notes I took when I was in the exhibition, I wrote, Margaret holds people, but it's more than people. It is connection and paying attention, feeling across species, objects, and experience. And I wonder, with that long, rambly beginning, if we can start by talking about this holding, this feeling, and considering what deserves attention, both in Cladach, but also in the wider exhibition and your wider practice.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Thanks. That was a brilliant introduction to both of you, and thanks for having me here today. Yeah, so I suppose Cladach is a good starting point because in a way, the film program that I've put together, which, as you said, evolves over phases, is really thinking about the kind of the research and the worlds and the communities that are built through the process of making films and of reaching out to different people and places and just being someplace with a camera, and paying attention. And I think that's a chord like that's always kind of run strong within my work. So in a way, what people are seeing when they're coming into the space is like years of devotion, right? Like as it's a kind of a devotional act, really. It's not like financially motivated usually. It's not, but it's really just about understanding, oh, I have these sets of skills, I have this kind of awareness and this capacity to respond to things through these tools. And part of my role as an artist, a filmmaker, as a maker of culture is in bringing the results of that work and sharing that with an audience, and thinking about the University of Glasgow and the idea that it's a place of learning. It's a site for inquiry. It's a site for discourse. I felt really strongly that I needed to have an offering for audiences in that site, something that was complex, something that included a wide range of methods and materials, but also something that really could resonate to someone, who was outside the university, right? And taken from a kind of everyday engagement with the world. And in particular, thinking about Glasgow and what it's like to have lived here maybe the past 10, 12, 15 years, So I've been living here for about 10 years. And so Cladach is interesting because it was a commission by Invisible Dust a while back to make a film engaging with the marine protected areas, that part of the kind of Scottish world leading legislation, looking at how do we kind of deal with pollution in the sea, how do we protect those fragile kind of underwater ecosystems. So, but I was thinking often about this kind of shoreline because Cladach means shore, as it describes the shoreline. It is a Gaelic word for shore, and thinking about the shoreline being this site of connection between terrestrial and aquatic communities, right? And so that's kind of how my brain works. I'm not necessarily thinking about people being isolated. I really often think about how people exist within worlds that maybe they've built or have been built around them. And one way or another, we're all really together, right? And so one of the beautiful things about being a filmmaker is you can bring people to literally together through the fabric of the film. And likewise, in exhibition, you can bring people together, things, objects, ideas together through the fabric of the space itself.
Yeah, so nice. And I mean, I guess that's evident in the exhibition with your focus on the cleaning staff at the Mackintosh house. Was that always something that you were planning to include in the work, or was it part of the evolution of the thinking of the show?
No, well, I've always been really interested in having an exhibition that includes a kind of documentation of the making of the exhibition, or the actual the work that goes on behind the scenes. I remember years ago when there were staff on strike at the South Bank, and there were sort of cuts going on, which are still happening in various institutions, around support staff. I was talking to my friend Anne Hardy about, we could make this poster, just kind of share it with the world, like all the things and all the people that are, not visible in the exhibition itself, but actually are so essential to making sure that the space is ready and able to accept audiences. But I have to say that the idea to film the cleaners was Dominic Patterson's. I can't take that idea. He suggested it, and I thought that's, yeah, absolutely amazing. So excuse me, I was lucky enough to spend some time with Anne and Rosie, and kind of just observe their routine. And there's like fantastic women. And I do have obviously a long-standing interest in what we might call women's work. Obviously, lots of different people do this kind of work in different ways. But I suppose that kind of connects a bit to my childhood, thinking about my mother worked as a cleaner when I was young, and went into people's homes to clean their things and their spaces. And I remember kind of watching her. So I think it must be quite a strong connection. And there's something about that even in the film that Maria and I made, and the kind of the notion of care, and and just the conservationist that comes and is caring for a statue in the film. And that connects to the sculptural works. It's really about a kind of an understanding that material possessions or things that we live with are embedded with a kind of value by the fact that they have a kind of proximity to our intimate lives, and that intimate connection doesn't need to be lost when something's beyond its use, right? So it's about repurposing or holding space for those things, those small details, or that debris, And yeah, attention is an important notion, right? More so now than ever, I dare say, though I've not lived, through eternity, so I don't know. Maybe so. Everybody says that in every age. And so I really think about, when I speak to students, even I think about projects that I choose, and it's really, the question is, how do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to spend your time with? How do you want to spend your time? What does the world need to see right now? Those are big questions that I think about, and I think probably lots of other artists and people do too.
I think time is such a theme of the exhibition. I feel like it's something we spoke about together, but also, I don't know, this strange expression mid-career, and this, I guess, this moment in your own life, but also just the process that is so evident in the show. So the process of making and how the show evolves. And I know that you started thinking about this exhibition and these works a long time ago, but then also in there's a conversation between you and Dominic that I read where you say that the show comes from a lifetime of observation and experience and preoccupation. So I guess, yeah, it's exactly those things. And I wonder if you can maybe talk a bit about what it feels like to be making this show right now. Like, does this feel like the exhibition that you wouldn't have made 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah, of course not. Of course not. I mean, I guess I come from a family background that's really like nobody was an artist. I didn't go to art galleries. I didn't go to museums. Actually, I shouldn't say that. My mother did. She did at our community college. She was studying painting when she was young and was wanted to become an art teacher. And then left school when she was met my father, became pregnant, and that was it. But there wasn't really, and I guess I grew up seeing her making things, like little craft things or ornaments that she would sell at a fair or something like that. But I think I wouldn't have had the confidence to make an exhibition like this probably 10 years ago. I didn't really print photographs until I moved up to Glasgow, though photography was very much embedded in my early formative years. As I picked up a camera when I was maybe 12, 13 years old in my high school photo club, and learned and then worked with a camera predominantly for a while until moving into film. But I didn't really print images and hang them up, and I didn't show objects at all 10 years ago. And so these are things that actually I was doing and making on my own beside the film work that I was more widely known for. And then, we all want to evolve, right? Like, not to stagnate as artists or people, and I'm a very curious person. And I often like, to test myself to see like what's possible, what I can do, what I'm interested in, and pursue new things, new ideas. So yeah, the installation work has evolved probably since moving to Scotland about 10 years ago, and it definitely wouldn't have been possible, and that's good. I mean, I suppose I can look back and I could think, well, I've tried lots of different ways of communicating my ideas and engaging with audiences, and in a way the show is a very confident one. It's really trusting my process. It's about not making sense. It's about revealing quite intimate details of my kind of personal life, even, or through the kind of hall that has documentation of different things. And so I feel like I'm okay to do that at this point in my life. I'm not sure I would have been up for doing that earlier. Or yeah, so who knows what will happen in another 10 years. We'll
Well,
see.
that's very exciting for all of us.
Mhm.
And we also spoke about this, the importance and potential luxury of having space to think and to experiment and to shift. And I guess it would be nice because the format of this exhibition and the assemblage of this exhibition is so experimental and specific. It's changing. There are 3 phases. It would be really great to hear a bit more about that, and also To a God Unknown, the film drama that is in progress. If you could tell us more about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, connected to what I just said. Obviously, this is my neighborhood. I live nearby. As I'm speaking to you, I'm like, I don't know, 15 minutes walk from the gallery. So that's really like unusual and quite exciting, right? So the idea that I could actually return to a space, that I could bring some of my collaborators into space to interact with the exhibition or to benefit from the generous kind of output of the Hunterian in general, has been a big factor in this exhibition. And I mean, there's partners, sort of community partners that, for instance, we're looking at assembly, and that's been made by Ronan, was a young person at the G20 Works, which is an organization that I've been really involved with over the past, well, yeah, probably about like 8 years or so even. And so Ronan came in and did that kind of text piece on the wall. And then you can see there's also a bit of art. The only color really drawing is by Joe Sunshine, who's also very famous and revered local artist in Maryhill, who, you know, made work. Well, actually, there's a coloring workshop on Sunday for young people where Joe's gonna be kind of working with young people, coloring in a handout that she had made for us. So yeah, so it's very much embedded in like me being here and being present. And so in being present, I was able to also think about the space as something that could evolve over time, something that I can return to. And you know, I often think about that because even years ago I had a kind of just a 4-week show at Tramway that was just looking mainly at film. Well, it was a whole installation in I guess it's Tramway 1. And you know, I changed the film program every week because I just thought, well, if I'm living around Tramway and I want to use the space and visit it, like that's great. I could come and see something new every week, potentially. It might be really, you know, drive you a bit crazy if you miss a week or whatever. But really, the concept was to offer something for locals first and foremost that they could return to and see evolve. And so that's been brilliant doing that with Dominic. And part of that, a kind of like process, that's the kind of heart of the exhibition, is connected to the making of a film, which is like a kind of feature length, you know, sort of experimental feminist kind of ghost story melodrama, using local kind of locations and cast, and, you know, kind of made on a wing and a prayer, as they say. So that is something that's like appearing in various ways in the moving image content, in the work that you see, in the sculptures and the photographs, but then also our final sort of installment of the moving image content in particular will have kind of scenes from the film for people to see. So it is a kind of educational process-based exhibition, and it's completely experimental. Like I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I'm filming in 2 weeks, and you know, and that's part of the risk and the joy of making things in this way. You know, it's about going out in the world and pulling your skills and your desires and your instincts, working with other people and seeing what happens, what can come from that. It's fun, right?
Gorgeous. I'm aware that we're at 25 past. Do we need to invite questions? Dominic, you said this would go quickly, and it has.
I'll just add myself back in. Thank you for that. It was really lovely, Margaret, to hear about your process, the ever-evolving process that I've seen parts of in the show and excited to see more of. We do have a question in the chat from Dominic. So Dominic has asked, says, I wanted to ask about that idea of holding that we spoke about. It made me think of the child psychotherapist Donald Winnicott and his idea of the holding environment and the good enough mother. Would either of you want to say something about maternal care or collective acts of care more widely as an aspect of the work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to speak to that a bit. I mean, I was like really, I wrote a kind of prose poem a while back called Container. I think it was called Container's Method or something. And I'm very interested in this idea of the container, the structure. It's things that hold things together, right? And I guess, a deep dive, you could look into that and think, oh, the room, the blah, 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 and certainly it's all connected. I mean, I am a full-time single mother. I've got 3 kids. So the maternal is unavoidable in my life, let's just say. And so it's been a preoccupation for my work for since the beginning, really. And as a kind of feminist filmmaker, obviously, I'm interested in what we might describe as women's work, right? Which I talked about earlier too. I think a little bit about the John Berger title, like, what is it? Hold everything dear. I often think about that phrase, and I suppose, it's what drives me often. I feel like the camera and the medium of film, and the work that I do is really about cultivating a kind of a temperature, like it's about cultivating warmth and security and connection. And, the lens is a kind of intimate tool for me. And so, maybe the lens, if I connect that to my gaze as a mother and as a person who has a loving look in the world, then I think that all kind of comes together, right? Like I really think in this time in particular, we do need to have spaces that can hold lots of different qualities all at once, and to understand that this kind of loving gaze is available no matter who you are, and I suppose the camera can be that with the right kind of craftsperson using it. And there is a psychological aspect to that. I once interviewed the filmmaker Al Micels, or I didn't interview him. I was a young filmmaker and I was assisting on a film where they interviewed Al Micels, who were these kind of, the Micels brothers had made these films, the Salesman and Grey Gardens, and amazing camera work, like absolute beautiful and very warm, like a very, very warm sense of looking, and and he even had a kind of gaze. Like I think in the interview, he kind of talked a little bit about, the ways he would look at people even without the camera, and creating a space where people felt seen and welcomed. And I think that's something you can that's something that artists can do. That's some of the empathetic and the kind of emotional kind of qualities that we have, the tools, make us really good at that kind of work. But mothers have that too, fathers have that too. I mean, you could argue all humans have that, right? Hopefully.
And maybe non-humans, I think.
And non-humans.
A little.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Gentle creatures. I mean, a loving look is such a beautiful sentence.
Yes, yeah. I mean, even what is it, Vibrant Matter, the text by, what's her name, the philosopher, one can, one is that kind of child, that Winnicott's child, sort of attaching itself to all kinds of things, and they all have a vibrancy that we can connect to, like, and that's part of the mindset that we're trying to get to now, right? With kind of this sort of ecological crisis, that we really need to reconnect with the fact that, love is not like a set expression. It's a kind of process, right, that we can apply to all kinds of things. And loving is caring. A level of care can manifest that feeling for people. So yeah, hopefully there's lots of different interpretations of the work in the in the film, but also in the show. But certainly I think that's something that comes across quite strongly.
Thank you, Margaret. Just before we finish, because I think we need to wrap up just in a second. I just wanted to ask, I know you touched on it a bit briefly. We spoke about G20 and Joe Sunshine, but I just wondered if you could speak a bit about some of the other collaborators that have been part of this show or featured in the work.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, G20 has been very important. There's also a kind of women's group that I've been talking to over time that I initially approached to do what I call story counselling, which is really where we just have a conversation about different kinds of stories, ideas of, you know, concepts that they might think about. And I might ask them questions, you know, do you believe in ghosts, for instance? You know, and then, I mean, my goodness, the women's group, that's all I had to ask. And then it was like an hour later, we were still talking about ghosts. So, I mean, it's often you don't really, as a facilitator, you're just there to have a chat and to hear people's, you know, responses to some of those concepts. So they've been amazing, and they've come back to the space. They've had a kind of tour of the Gallery 1, and actually we're going to be having a seance in the space as well. Speaking of ghosts. And they will be, some of the women from that group will be featuring in the film as kind of extras. And there's even a scene of a kind of typical night for them at the hub in the Wynford estate. I mean, beyond that, there's local like high schools and primary schools that will be involved. Hillhead High School and Notre Dame High School. You know, I mean, like, it's the kind of cast that's like kind of amazing. Like, I was looking for a midwife to play a role, working with my friend, the filmmaker Eiko Soga, who's going to be playing the pregnant character in the film, a pregnant woman. And I just happened to get an eye test and ran into a woman that I knew from the school run ages ago. And it turns out that she's retrained as a midwife. So, so my eye appointment manifested a midwife for the film, just from the community. So it's that kind of project. It's that kind of project. You know, I'm surprised you guys aren't in the film at this point, actually.
I think we're open.
Might be good.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Margaret, and thank you, Helen, as well. The show is on until Sunday, the 19th of October, at the Hunterian Art Gallery. And I think we're in the second phase of this now, so it will evolve and change again. So if you go and see it today, it will be different by the end of the month. So I hope you can all get over and see the show before it ends. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us online today. And I hope you all have a lovely weekend when it comes to it.
Great. Thank you. Bye.